Welcome to Root Cellar, an inquisitive look into sustainable food preservation and ancient wisdom for the modern world. Welcome to Root Cellar, a series focused on inspiring and educating on the art of fermentation and all things sustainable food preservation. Today, we're going to focus on brewing our very first batch of kombucha. Kombucha is a fermented tea that allegedly has its roots from ancient China. You may have seen it in stores and health food stores. It's extremely overpriced. It's ironically a very easy thing to brew at home and a very inexpensive thing. So if you have some black tea kicking around, some sugar, a glass vessel, and a cloth, we can make this work. The other thing that I'm going to insist on this first time through is that we either buy or borrow a SCOBY. And what that is a symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. Some people think it looks like a mushroom and it will do the heavy lifting of the fermentation for you. So I recommend, getting one, and I know you can make it at home, but this will just, we don't want to do too many things at once. So let's start off. We'll get a healthy SCOBY and we'll get it into place, and we're going to follow my very first recipe I ever used. It's super simple. And, within probably 10 to 15 days, we will have you a batch of a couple gallons of kombucha for a few bucks. So this is the start of your fermentation kombucha business. Here we go. All right, I started out brewing kombucha with the following recipe or ratio. I used 16 cups unfiltered water, 24 grams black tea, which is equivalent to 12 tea bags, and 1.5 cups of sugar. So right off the bat, I say unfiltered water. I've experimented boiling water. I've even used tap water, and I've had similar to equal results, but you are playing with fire a little bit. So, unfiltered water is your safest bet, let's say that, to make sure your batch has the best chance of success. You're not introducing, potential bacteria from the tap, etc. I also found that black tea stands up to the boil. We're going to be boiling this for a little bit longer than we would with the normal tea. So I find something like green tea is a little bit easier to get bitter. So black tea is just a good, safe place to start. And as you get a little bit more experience, you can start to substitute in other teas like green or white or rooibos, or a combination of both. And I know 1.5 cups of sugar seems like a ton of sugar, but remember that is the food source for the yeast and bacteria, the SCOBY. So it will be processing a lot of that sugar. So when you drink the final product, it is, a much lower percent of sugar than when we start. So it is processing that into lactic acids, etc. So right at the hop, it's super important to get all your tools for the job and then sanitize everything. So keep your brewing station clean. We don't want to introduce bad bacteria. We're going to be using bacteria, but we want to control what we're introducing to our surroundings. So any germs, anything like that, we can be adding unwanted bacteria. So for someone like me who's a bit of a control freak, I think that I enjoy this part of the process. So keep your brewing station clean. So the first step for me is I boil half of the water. So we mentioned 16 cups of unfiltered water. I boil 8 cups, 12 tea bags in there, and I let it steep for approximately 10 minutes. And then I remove the tea bags and I add 8 cups of cold unfiltered water to help neutralize and just bring that temperature up a little bit, because we cannot move on to our next step until we let that formula cool a little bit. If it's too hot, it can kill the SCOBY, so we have to be careful with that. So for brewing, I use a nice big glass container. It's important not to use plastic. That can leach other type of chemicals into the formula, so glass is your best bet. I bought a huge glass vessel for about 15 bucks and worked for years. So the next step, after we've cooled our tea mash, if you will, we let it cool. We add our sugar, 1.5 cups, and then you know, once that is closer to room temperature, we can go ahead and add the SCOBY to the mix. So the SCOBY is going to do all the heavy lifting, and that sugar and that tea is going to be its food source. So again, a SCOBY is just think of it as like a sourdough starter. The acronym stands for Symbiotic Culture of Bacteria and Yeast. And you can make that yourself, but I do find it so much easier to buy a SCOBY, get one from a friend, just to get started. You can keep that thing going for years. It can lay dormant in the fridge with very little food, and it can go in a cool, dark spot, and you can kind of keep feeding it every couple of weeks if you want to keep it really active. I find they're quite versatile, and they will treat you well, and there's even some kooky stuff you can do if you get too much SCOBY, which you will. So once we finish brewing that large tea concoction, we've added our sugar, we've let it cool down to room temperature, we've added our SCOBY, we're good to put it away to start fermenting. And based on the temperature of your house, kind of the fluctuations where you live, I find that it's usually somewhere between 7 and 12 days. So when you put the SCOBY in, we're not going to mess with it. It's going to take maybe a day to float to the surface and find its spot. We're going to cover that vessel, put it in a nice dark spot where it won't be disrupted too much. And temperature is really important here. I find it usually takes 7 to 12 days, kind of depending on the temperature. And I live in an old house, an old character home. It's drafty, there's influxes of temperature. It's a bit hard for the SCOBY to kind of keep up. But I find the warmer, you know, if you're on 20 degrees Celsius to about 25 degrees Celsius is your best bet. So maybe put it in the warmest place in your house, maybe a laundry room, something like that. And you're gonna cover this vessel and leave it alone. It's a living being, it's going through the process, so just give it time. Don't check it for 7 days. So check your kombucha fermentation after about 7 days. Make sure your SCOBY is floating up to the top as it should be. Another thing you're gonna look for is that liquid would start out, you know, a really dark brown color, assuming you use black tea. And it's gonna have changed significantly, almost to like a golden light brown mixture that looks a little more appetizing. The SCOBY itself is a weird looking, you know, bacteria yeast concoction. So don't be alarmed, there's some different colors on it. It doesn't look incredibly appetizing. But the one thing you do want to look for is mold. If you see any blue, fuzzy mold living on top of that SCOBY, unfortunately that's no good. You'll have to throw the SCOBY and the entire kombucha mix. Aside from that, you might see some like long strands hanging off the SCOBY down into the mixture. That's okay, that's just yeast strands and that's totally fine. So if you want to take your kombucha brewing to the next level, you can get a pH reader. They're pretty cheap, you can get one off Amazon. If it's sitting somewhere between 2.5 and 3.5, that's kind of your ideal range for your kombucha. Other than that, I just typically go by how it looks. So does it have that nice light color? Has it processed? Is the SCOBY healthy living on top? No mold. Somewhere between 7 to 12 days. You can smell it. As you get used to brewing, you will notice that as it brews longer, it'll get a little bit more acidic. You can taste it if you're brave enough, just as it is. And that will give you an idea. You know, some people will prefer a little bit more sour, acidic. 7 days might keep you a little bit on the less sour end of things, which you might prefer. So yeah, just kind of keep an eye on it and then pull it when you're ready, somewhere between that 7 to 12 days based on the temperature in your home. I find in Canada here, it often can take a little bit longer. So maybe 10 days is a safe bet for your first batch. Yeah, and then pull it out, remove your SCOBY, and then we are ready for our second part of the ferment. That's where we flavor, and we're looking to kind of add some natural carbonation, but this only takes a couple days, so this is the fun part. So congratulations on your first brewing. That's awesome. All right, folks, look at that. We have our first ferment of the kombucha complete. That took me about 12 days because I live in an older character home, and as you can see, it's got that nice lighter color to it, a kind of a lighter brown gold color. When we started, it was a very dark black tea. Let's see what it looks like under here. So that is our SCOBY. No mold. You can see some yeast strands and things like that. That's okay. That's kind of right there is the kombucha when it started, and those areas are where it kind of grew. And I'll give you a side view here. Not a super thick SCOBY because it's young, but that will continue to grow and grow and grow, and you'll get layers and layers, and that'll be a couple inches thick, and you'll have to recycle it or compost it or find something else to do with that SCOBY. And as you can see, it's that nice, beautiful goldish color. So I can tell by the smell, by the color, that it's ready. I find it's pretty forgiving. If you go 7 to 14 days, you'll be on the young end to starting to get a little bit more sour, but it's good either way. It's a pretty forgiving process. So yeah, I'm pretty stoked on it. And now comes the fun part. We're gonna transfer that liquid to these airtight swing top bottles, and we're gonna add some flavoring so we can get some natural carbonation and some good flavor. So really simple this time. I'm gonna do one just with some orange, another with some canned peaches, and another with some Saskatoon berries. I'm just gonna muddle those up, put them at the bottom of the swing top bottles, and I will just take some of that kombucha, add it in there, and give it a few days. I will burp it a couple times a day just to make sure we're not over carbonating. I know with some berries and some of these flavorings that have quite a bit of sugar, some of these flavors that have a really intense sugar source can carbonate quickly, faster than others. So it's a good idea just to check them a couple times a day. These bottles are pretty sturdy and will stand up, but I have had some small explosions in the past, so proceed with caution. And I would try to use a heavy duty glass bottle as opposed to a pop bottle for that reason, or a plastic bottle I should say. Okay, let's get that mother SCOBY out of there, and let's get the flavors muddled up in those bottles, and let's start funneling the booch in. All right, so we took our orange, our peach, and the Saskatoons from my mother-in-law's garden, and I blended those up, and I filtered them in using these filters. And as you can see, there's the orange, there's the peach, and there's the Saskatoon at the bottom. I usually go about 10% of the whole vessel, so give or take. A little more is not going to hurt anything. It's just going to remove some of the volume for actual kombucha. So next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the mother SCOBY, put it in a nice vessel, save a little bit of that that kombucha for that starter kombucha for the next batch. Here we go. Some people are totally grossed out by mother SCOBY, but don't be. Definitely a more elegant way to do that. Just a little guy. You can let it sit how it lays, and I want to make sure I have about at least a cup of starter kombucha for the next project. So that should be lots there. So we'll slide that guy to the side. Let's put one of these cleaned filters in there, and let's start adding to these guys. And hopefully we have enough for these 3 vessels. And shout out to our friends at Salt Spring Cidery for the excellent swing top bottles that we are upcycling for this project, which I'm sure they would be happy about. That's what they're all about too. Whoop. Do the best job as you can. You're going to spill a little bit. It's the nature of the beast. Now I fill it up to about 95%, so maybe just starting to go up that neck, and that gives it a little bit of head space to bubble, boil, and trouble, which you can see it's going to be doing. I know from experience that this Saskatoon berries have just a ton of sugar, and it's going to ferment like crazy. So be ready for that. It's going to ferment twice as fast as the orange and the peach, but it's going to be really nice and flavorful. And as you can see, we're already getting a really nice bubble on the top. So that's going to carbonate really quickly. I would try burping that thing in 6 hours if you can, 12 at the most, because it's going to shoot up to the ceiling if you leave that for a couple days, and it's going to explode if you leave it for a week, and people are going to hate you for it. I've done that. I've made that mistake in the past. So look at that beautiful color though. So you can shake it if you want, but keep in mind that that activates the liquid.
So with these other ones, I can go a little bit higher up the neck if I want, because I know they're not going to be as troublesome. So this is my peach. I've never had a peach kombucha before. I think peach would pair really well with some other flavor profiles. But again, we're keeping it simple. And then I'm hoping by the end we might, you know, get upwards of well over 10 flavors. So that is carbonating more than I would have guessed, but that's a good thing. That means there's sugars. That means it's activating. That means it's alive. That means it's reacting to what we are doing. And now the orange. And after we're done with this, if we have some liquid left, we're just going to add it back to that Mother SCOBY because that will just help our next batch.
All right, so it's been about 3 days since we bottled it. This is our ginger kombucha, and it's super carbonated. I've been burping it 2 times a day, I would say, since I started the second ferment, and it looks great. Let's try it out. I think it's ready to go. Got a nice carbonation that's holding there. I have just burped it, so it's not super carbonated. I just didn't want to explode it on the video, you know what I'm saying? And I'm going to filter it into this nice vintage wine glass. Look at that, nice bubbles, great color. You can tell it's a ginger booch. Almost looks orange, eh? But got some nice small bubbles, and let's try it out. Oh, that was fantastic. It's strong, but it's not overpowering. And look, if you put it in a nice glass like this, it feels celebratory. You feel proud of it. It feels like you created something that's worth sharing. So cheers everyone to our first potentially batch of kombucha. What a fun fermented tea that's been around forever, and costs a fraction of the price of what it would buying it at the store. So thanks for being part of the journey.